Okay, this is kind of a response to Herbal Shaman, but also just full of information, and I'll even show you them making a mummy here later in the whole thing. It's probably going to be a two-parter. You know me when I say that it might go three, but we'll try to be concise and see if we can get a lot of information out and some that's not listed here and add to it. Eugene Strawhall examined some pre-dynastic European skulls at Cambridge University. He sent some samples of the hair to the Institute of Anthropology at Charles University in Prague to be analyzed. The hair samples were described as varying in texture from wavy to curly and in color from light brown to black. Strohall summarized the results. Okay, well, wavy to curly. Um, People are trying to take things out of context all kinds of ways nowadays. My hair is wavy to curly in the first place. If I were to get, especially the longer it got, and as soon as it got past manageable, one side or the other would start flipping out, and then it starts really getting curly. I would say that if I got out of the shower or swimming or something and just shook it dry and not combed through it, it would look like Robert Plant's old hair whenever it was real long. Okay? But if you combed through it, then it was pretty much straight and had a lot of little body waves and curls, especially at the end. That was about it. And depends on what you wanted to do with it. And of course, during hairband days, you could puff it up and do all kinds of things with it. But regardless of that, I would have been described to be that amount. But people want to take that out of context and mean certain things. Also mentioned is light brown to black. And yeah, that is the color range they had. Light brown being tan or golden or what we would call blonde to black, and being a red haired people mixed in with there too, and a chestnut and auburn kind of hair, and brown and black. And really, pretty much more like what a European mix would look like than the current people are there, which are really pretty much all black haired and some dark brown, and rarely you get the lighter traits out of them. But the current people are more a later thing anyhow, and we're talking about pre-dynastic, or he's trying to go into it. The outline of the cross sections of the hairs was flattened, and indices rated from 35 to 65. These peculiarities also show the Negroid influence among the Badarians, which are known as being somebody living in the area of pre-dynastic Egypt, along with Nakada and a few other cultures, right? Now that ends the statement, but he doesn't put the quotes off there. This is a sneaky. Blacks like to do, instead of saying quotes and then going next statement, even a separate statement, they just go right after it. The term Negroid influence suggests intermixture, but as the table suggests, this hair is more Negroid than the San and the Zulu samples, currently the most Negroid hair in existence! Exclamation mark. And then you would know that that wouldn't have been from the actual researcher. Um, and that is actually untrue. I believe it's the Matilda site that has a whole paper that somebody did like 2 years after this using the same samples, uh, or some of the same samples, showing nothing along that order, but people, what they were looking at is, okay, there's real straight people, like some of the people in India have real straight people, and Japanese people have real straight people, not a lot of curly hair and things. They have to put products into it, you know? And a lot of white people have straight hair, especially some Nordics and everything, but they go all the way to curly. In fact, what's that guy's name? There are a lot of people, like if you look at the people who paid Frodo and stuff, they've got curly hair. But there was this blonde haired kid whenever I was younger, and oh man, I had his name before I started this. And I want to say Steve Aston, but no, that's the dude from, it's like he looks kind of like the boy from Blue Lagoon. Well, that dude's hair is real curly, right? But it gets past that point. You can get even real curly hair, almost like a Shirley Temple situation. Of course, we know that was done on a hair roller thing, but we know now that the Egyptians did curly hair on hair rollers too. They made curly hair, and they would do extra things, especially with these mummies, right as they were done them. They found the rods and everything, and they were like, "What is this?" Well, they would heat it up, and then wrap the hair around it and hold it and slide it out, and do this to their hair. And apparently they did it whenever they were alive, and stuff. So they were already doing hair working and things like that. But that none of that's going to be thrown in here at all. Let's just go on. In another study, hair samples from the 12th, 18th to 25th dynasty individuals produce an average index of 51 as far back as 1877. Yeah, okay, that's that old thing, and I know about that. It's a separate one, and he's trying to put three things together for us here and tell you they were black people. Now, I would like to mention that this is 107, replies that have gone, and it started off with a big whoopoo and a we was kangs kind of situation, but it has died to the point that they weren't. There was all the blue-eyed ones that started it out and everything, and so what this guy's pretty much left with is there was some admix, which is he denies straightly, but they were saying that, man, there's some people with real curly hair too, even though they're tan and chestnut hair, so that might influence, have said some Negro inference into these Badarians. And to be honest with you, people back then and still to this day want to find something extremely different. Just the common Egyptian tomb that's empty and has some half-ass writings on the wall that nothing stand out about. Like, well, there was that one just a few years ago where they had that strange pink, and it showed you they were all real Caucasian and a pink color, and from 5th dynasty, late 4th, early 5th dynasty, and they were supposed to get back on an exacting date and have this paper come out on it. And I did another little video on it, but it didn't have the full thing. And then now they're doing genetic samples on it, and then I think that got stopped, and I don't know why that got stopped, but anyhow, and it showed a weird pink that they left alone. Regardless of that, that's woo wee, unless it's that or a real big tomb, or they find something with somebody, They recently did that one with Josh Gates, and they went down into a tomb and they found a new area. Now, I'll tell you that they had already found that, and then they left that one deal alone, all right? But somebody had already crawled down through there, and you can tell because he says there's the skull on the side and da-da-da, and like, how would you know it unless he had been down and around? Some people have been already down and around through there. It wasn't like they were the first ones, and I think most people realize that, although it seemed like it was brand new. Well, it was really brand new to the world, but there's been a few people down through there already. But anyhow, so they go into there and they look at that. But trashed sarcophaguses and things. Really, the one up top showed you a lot more and everything out of it. But that was a neat show too. But let's just go on, because I've got to get into the hair and things like that in reality. In another study, hair samples from the 18th to 25th dynasties talking about, and then they end up averaging at 64, and so they get curlier and everything there. But that was the 25th dynasty is whenever the Cushites took in, and they did have some Nubians around and stuff. And Nubians have the tight ringlet hair that they've only found a couple of desiccated mummies of, but it's not, they didn't make the mummies, they're just desiccated out in the desert and stuff. Looks like from the fights. And everything, whenever they would talk about how they'd kill them off and stuff, and they'd leave them for the birds or whatever. But at the same time, there's one that's Manicapuri. It's King Tut's fan bearer and everything. He's supposed to be a castrated eunuch, but amazingly, you'll hear all the way from he was a high priest to he was a high official to something else, but then he's on the wall of King Tut's tomb, and he says something about it in his tomb. But nobody's going to talk about that anymore, and they're going to just let it. People just say whatever they want about it. But King Tut had Negroids on his sandals, and he said it was to crush them with every step, even into the afterlife. And if you look on the box that he has there, it's him looking very Caucasian and tanned, running over them, black people with a chariot and stuff, and dogs attacking him and crazy stuff and everything. And it's amazing that black people try to claim him. And also you go to what his parents were in Akhenaten, and then now I think that they figured out that the girl that's the young lady or the pretty lady that they were talking about before is actually probably Nefertiti herself, and that was genetically hooked up to him, and then it would have been King Tut and everything. But everybody still wants to link him to having done that one of his wives was actually a second sister or something, to a second half sister to himself, and because he had a club foot in the first place, they want to say that he had inbreeding that had caused that. So maybe it was him, and they let loose the genetics on King Tut, and it ended up showing that he was closer related to Anatolians and long time ago, Anatolians and early European farmers, and some people of the Levant, and nothing else through down there that really would key point it. And of course, everybody freaked out. In fact, Zayuwas didn't want to let it come out. It came out because they showed it. They showed the information on the monitor on TV talking about it, but he didn't say exactly what it was. But there are people that work on that same machine with the same stuff, and he just took the information and plugged it in theirs and read it out of it, and it showed, exactly what haplotype that is and everything. A team of Italian anthropologists researched the Journal of Human Evolution in 72 and 1980. They measured two samples consisting of 26 individuals from predynastic, the 12th dynasty and 18th dynasty. They produced a mean of 66.5. An average overall sets of Egyptian hairs was 60.2. African, he puts on that. Of course, I don't know why they always try to put African. North Africa above the Sahara was always Caucasians. East Africa all the way to the Horn and all the way out. And I don't know how they try to get upon that and just say, well, they try to have the logic, well, black people's a home of Africa's black people, right? And it's, yeah, but Africa was named after a white guy, and it was called Libya way back. And if you look at Herodotus' map, they didn't know sub-Saharan Africa exists. They knew it went to the abyss of death of way that you can't make it. For a long time, they're supposed to have the Phoenicians go all the way around, but then after that, they still had that flattened button map that didn't have that, or actually the Horn of India quite right, or anything like that. But that could have been a Phoenician trick because they were already, doing marketing and stuff. But that's for another video. So saying African doesn't mean anything. In fact, biology, they tell you, well, we all came out of Africa. I'll say so. There was Caucasians and Denisovans, like the Aboriginals of Australia and some of the islanders and stuff like that have a darker skin to them. In India, where that's supposed to be a Denisovan people, they found it ran all the way up into Asia, East Asia. But that's neither here nor there. And also Caucasians, apparently came out of the effects of this. Although it looks like it probably would have been a very much a change that showed back way in Homo erectus, because it has such far larger variations. And then they're all talking about Neanderthal having blonde hair and everything, and some people try to say that's where we got our light hair, but no, they figured out that light hair genes go back 600,000 years. Modern man, Homo sapiens, goes back 315 now that we figured out of Ibn Jarud. So I tried to reply to this guy actually, and I gave him the sample from Joanne Flesher, where she said the sites are Sinotrichus, where I'm sorry, these dark-skinned Olotrichus Egyptians were, in your opinion, Caucasian. Are you serious? Well, Olotrichus is somebody that's got extremely curly hair, like Shirley Temple on up, and like that blonde-haired dude. The man off the Brady's had a perm-looking thing that wasn't done by chemicals and so on. And if a black person wants to relax their hair down, it's amazing. But what Caucasians put in their hair to make it tighten up and curl, they have to put that in their hair to make it even uncurl. Yeah, and then try to straighten it out and everything. They go through all this thing and straighten everything, trying to make it look like Caucasian. There are a lot of people do it nowadays, but a lot of times they just put weaves in of Caucasian type people's hair that's dyed or whatever, and put it in their hair, and then try to look like a blonde and do all those things. And it takes extreme admix to have something like that. It takes admix to actually have facial hair. In most black people, they have slight to light facial hair, like they might get a patching. They wouldn't have a chin beard or anything nice like that. And the Egyptians in the earliest time are showing chin beards, but he's trying to go with an idea that, well, at least there was mixed into the Badarians. Oh, I never mentioned it. The Badarian one that disproves it or whatever talks about how whenever they looked at 111 of them, that about half of them were destroyed and disintegrated enough to where they could tell it was a body, but they didn't have enough information in cranial to see, and the hair gone and everything. but that 15 of them were decisively European type hair, and I think 9 of them were red. I mean, I'm sorry, 9 of them were blonde, 5 of them were red, out of the half or so that's left, so 60-ish or 55 that had some hair at least with a bit of a skull, everything, and go, well, there's some hair, what color is it? And people have always tried to discount that as saying, oh, well, that they bleached out from the sun, and you go, well, all these guys are buried together, and here's brown and black and red and blonde. They're all the same thing, and so we dug up all graveyards over here, and yeah, that happens here too. And Caucasian people have all those color of hair, but there's other people that don't. But let's go ahead, and oh, they're real curly to non-curly, so they're really trying to find that curly to non-curly, and difference in them, I guess you'd say, and in the process are trying to say that they're the only reason for curly hair, and that Greeks have curly hair. Ginger, okay, that's the nickname they've given it, is a pre-dynastic Badarian that's found in the British Museum. So it's along with this group that we're talking about, and they kept him. He was one of the best prepared. It shows the early Egyptian vase work and the reed boats and stuff. I tell you, that matches Sumerians things and the symbols. And if you've watched, I've done some pre-Egyptian videos here recently, and in the process tried to show where people and genetics are starting to show what waves happened in what way. It looks like there was waves going in and out of Egypt, and of course Egypt is the bottleneck that leads in and out of Africa. And so what makes Egyptians and the area seem somewhat tough is because it's not like people stayed everywhere, but almost like a sloshing back and forth of the ocean, if it was on land instead of sea, of people coming this way and that way and going around the Mediterranean. Nothing stopping them at the Delta, and especially when they have boats, and that thus the reason for Phoenicians and Carthaginians and the Punic people over there and North Africa, being in there. And Phoenicians and Canaanites are synonymous, by the way. The Phoenicians call themselves Canaan. And people try to make a difference between the port cities and non-port cities, and it really doesn't have that. It's looked as a larger dynamical name than what's tried to be given in the Bible, like, oh, and there was this and this and this and everything. And of course, one of them is a Greek name given to them, and it recants the idea of the phoenix, but I'm not going to get into that. What hair texture did the ancient Egyptians have? Well, I chose this one because it starts off with a kala. Now, in this one, he's telling us that a kala is a mulatto, only 1/3 Negro. And this is from a few years back. You can tell he's a little bit younger. Now, he does show some signs of facial hair, but not full, and he couldn't grow out a full beard, but mustache kind of and everything, right? One sign in Egyptians, by the way, and it's different too than what Negroids usually are, is they don't have usually bushy eyebrows and large eyebrows. The more Negroids you are, and closer to West Africa too, and a lot of Nilotics too, almost have no eyebrows. In fact, they take pride sometimes when they're trying to make fun of white people and call them Neanderthals or something, that they will say that they're all hairy, but we ain't got that hair on us and stuff like that. But then when you go, well, the ancient Egyptians had red hair and blonde hair and everything, then they just get real mad and stuff. But so this is his hair recently. He's done with a lot of products recently and gotten his hair look like it did, and you can see him cornrowed it down for that one deal and stuff, so on. But it would be a fro, and he's a definite mulatto, but they're saying 1/3 Negro. And how are they getting that? Well, I think there was a half and half and a Negro together, and the product of that is what bred with the mulatto that made his parents. And his mom is white, and so his dad would have been the product of a half mulatto in the first place, and so that gives him 1/3, whatever. And regardless of that, an ancient Egyptian pharaoh does not have hair that will turn into a fro without modern products and trying to straighten your hair out. An ancient Egyptian, which I've always said this one here, the more you look at him, it has different angles on him. He looks like Christopher Reeve. You know, he really, I bet, you know, sad to say it this way, but I bet right now if you dug up Christopher Reeve, he would look a lot like this. Human bodies darken and stuff, and I said I was going to show you a modern mummy being made and everything, and they took a pale white man, yeah, as light as me. Does it show up today? They took a modern one, lighter than me, and lighter than Bob Brier that does it, who's known as Mr. Mummy in Egyptology, and they do it to him, and actually comes out beef jerky dark. We'll get there here shortly, but let's start this out in the first place. This is Joanne Fletcher's paper about excavations at Hierakonpolis mummies in South Egypt. And so that had been way up the Nile, right? And the vast majority of the hair samples discovered at the site were cyclocus. So this is Caucasian, in a type as opposed to the heliotrichus, which is Negroid type of hair, a feature which is standard through dynastic times. So it's standard for its Caucasian hair through dynastic times. Straightforward, that's the end of that. But although most of the hair found in natural dark brown color, not black, but dark brown color, natural red was also discovered in association with male burial number 79. His hair was originally falling in a wavy style, ending in small ringlet type open center curls. So like they had curled it around maybe a rod or something, or done something to it that made it look like Shirley Temple curls. Together with other burials, this reveals the great attention paid to appearance, the hair obviously of great importance to both men and women alike. There were clearly a great range of styles by even this early date, from extreme short crops, little more than a centimeter long, is noted in the burial number 76, a female of 25 to 30 years. But she would be wearing a wig most of the time. Anyhow, but to longer styles is demonstrated by the large quantity of dark brown and wavy hair set in particularly twisted links, recovered intact in association with burial 91. Although the hair itself was discovered completely detached from the skull with some of the scalp, it was possible to determine that it would have originally been set at shoulder length. Further facial hair recovered in association with the red-headed man, burial number 79, appears to have been cut with a sharp blade, and while analysis of one mass of hair discovered last season proved to be an almost complete beard, possibly the oldest surviving example yet found. And this would have been somebody who would have had a grown out beard, and they shaved him for his burial rites and stuff, but he had a grown out beard at that time, and they saved it, much like wigs are done. So this man, if he wanted to use a wig, but it doesn't look like it was set up to be a wig or anything, they just apparently shaved him. And a lot of these mummies have shown stubble. There have been guys that got it for them with magnifying glasses and stuff, and they go, man, even though this thing has been, turned into beef jerky and darkened and shellacked pretty much, you can see some hair sticking out because, they weren't the best Wilkinson razors back then, and hair still grows for a couple of days after death. So during the process and the skin recession, there's still some hair. Oh, this one's blonde looking in his chin and around here and so on. They said was, oh, he's brown haired and he's okay. Anyhow, sharp blade analysis of the beard, possibly oldest found. Body hair was also found during both seasons, including underarm and pubic hair. And so they noted that the people weren't shaved and everything, but also not all. There were some that were shaved, but they weren't shaving their armpits. Even women back then, really. That's been a more modern thing, where people realizing the more odorific and the less feminine it looks, and so women shave their legs and things like that. Don't act like it don't happen. Black people have trouble shaving their face, and it causes all kind of bumps, and they have to use that hair depilatory stuff instead, because it messes with their face, and they show you it's just not natural to them, but they're going to try to prove it. But so you look at something like this. This is a pre-dynastic Egyptian, and it's done in ivory instead of a black stone or something, although that would have been a fertility thing because of the soil that they've shown. It's got thick eyebrows on it. You'll notice that in pictures, and nobody really mentions that as just one of another trait, though. And fairly thin lips, alkaline nose, It had this top, and people have made all kinds of things. They found a bunch of these shpw dolls during this one time, and it looks like somebody took a reed and stuck it in the top even after they'd made the lines. And somebody said that what you could do was take a lotus flower and cut it off an inch from the flowerette, and then it would, a flower stem's pretty hollow, and you would shake and shove it on that, and she'd have a flower on her head. But I don't think they've ever found any real evidence of that, and you'd think that they would have done it in the burial right there with it. Of course, flowers don't last very long, do they? But a lot of it does, and especially in these things, it just desiccates and dries it out. Like, you can put dried flowers in a book, and if nobody disturbs it, there they are. And they can find little bitty stuff too. But so this type of hair that's just a combed look, this is even more curly than that. And that's just a modern Middle Eastern woman, Persian type. And you'll see Somali hair and how it's curly like this. But Caucasian people can have hair as curly as this. One of my best friends growing up, named David, had, blondish hair that turned darker brown as he got older, just like mine did, and it was curly like this too, but I can't use him for an example. But and he got it real long, and then he wanted to straighten it out, and he had to put a perm stuff in there and use this other stuff and straighten it out, and he straightened it out, and really it never got near as curly as it was before. But I think that's because he would keep it brushed out and so on, but it never was as straight as it was. After you put that straightener in there, it was just like straight. I mean, it was weird to see him have changed just to be like, bam. And then you have African American women, and even though there's a 20% admix in average of Caucasian in them, and you can see that she's much lighter than this lady here, who does have a lot of Caucasian features as opposed to Negroids because of admix in Somalis. I believe it's up to 30% in Somali, but more like 22 or something, and then Ethiopians is 40, some areas 50%, believe it or not, admix, back forth, but 20, and they still would naturally have hair like this unless they use all these modern chemicals. Now we're going to look now at a earliest dynastic Egyptian, and you see somebody here, and man, I hope you can see that good, but in looking at it, it's got a band right here over his eyes, right? And then this whole thing looks reddened, and that's because they put red ochre on him. It's one of the last ones you see in the symbolic red ochre burial and a blending that they have. And I've showed you the ancient Canaanite red ochre burials and all these early Caucasians, and they face them to the east and cover them with red ochre and make a fake little womb and everything, and it all goes into a channel of rebirth, which is a shamanistic thing that leads into this whenever these cultures converged and put it all together and made up something else, which becomes unique somewhat in the Egyptian culture. But they've got hieroglyphics and things, and that comes from Sumerians, and then the animals and stuff that they get from there comes from up there in the grains and the emmer wheats from there in Upper Anatolia, right where the Tigris and Euphrates arc off to at the end. So these collection of people from the Fertile Crescent. Anyhow, this man here has much straighter hair than any of those that we were looking at. And while it does seem to be hennaed or somewhat reddened from the process, the point out of the reason he has a headband mark, it looks like on here, is that part of the banding got exposed not enough to the shellac. They had gone around twice or whatever, and when they took it off, look how light his skin is. So he won't even get as dark as the beef jerky, but it did happen here whenever they kept desiccating him and put the secondary shellac type thing on him, and that's Caucasian hair, undeniable. And here's another sample of it, and even though this is a dark brown to black hair, it's easy for one to see that this is Caucasian hair, but you would run it under a microscope and you can tell everything about it. And this is the type identification that they would do to try to get these amount of curl and amount of twist and curl that's in hair and so on. And before they had genetics, because they never thought they were going to be able to form a way of getting genetics out of spliced pieces, or enough to where pieces could add up to say, well, this goes together, this is it, or even get large enough sections to pick out anything like that anymore. And it's amazing we have here lately. But in the process, it seems that we were able to find out genetic strings that are so long that we know it's the same as this, and it shows up in haplogroups. And where those things string along shows you a before and after, and almost you can get a dating out of that, like you can out of, radiocarbon dating things, but you can see inlays and how long ago and things like that, as much as this, it gives you a range, and it's not as good a range as radiocarbon dating gives you, but it can show you that there's influx, and they can see people that do and don't, and here's where it came in, but that person only had about this because they only get this, and it's starting to get well opened up. Many Egyptian women wore curled plait wigs, but this wasn't their natural hair's texture. The most striking example of this is the mummy of the princess Hadembet. Hadembet and her wig. The mummy's own hair appears to be straight, but she has an impressively curly wig. This is one of the few mummies where you can clearly see with the lighter skin color too, and her contrast of her hair. There's a good view of the wig with its long curls. And so what we're looking at here is a lady that pretty much has straight hair and maybe a little bit of curls at the best on it, right? But she had a ceremonial wig that's buried with her, right? And it's a lot more curly. And they have realized that now that a lot of this effect that they're doing to these curls and ringlets is with a hot iron and rolling it around it and things, and that you probably would have done this to wigs, crimping them up and so on, and especially for the burial. But what he's talking about, her skin being so fair, this is one of the burials where it looks like they did not put the secondary shellac on it. That, I don't know, maybe they could tell at the time that it didn't need it, or they didn't have the certain ingredients that they knew wouldn't be good for the mummy, so they didn't do it and so on. But there's about 6 or 8 of these, and some of them are quite famous, and they have this chalk or white skin mixed with a dark background in places and stuff, and make people feel like they can't tell somebody's ethnicity from pictures and from facial structure like that. But this thin nasal slit is a good giveaway on the fact this is a Caucasian, and this head structure right here in the first place. But then we're talking about hair, and both of this hair set on her head and the wig is Caucasian hair. So then we have Queen Ty, and people have thrown a big fit about Queen Ty, and I'll show something about Queen Ty up here coming up. But here's the first showing of Queen Ty, and this is that girl that's the singer now. Oh my God, and I forgot her name now. It's not Tamara. What is it? Aaliyah? Well, yes, it. What? Yeah. Anyhow, you know what I'm talking about. Write it over there in the sidebar. But you can see this is just a few years ago before she got taken up into being a star or whatever, and her skin complexion back then, but also her hair and what her natural hair would look like. And she's admixed, right? But that's still about as good as you get out of it. And this fuzzy hair like that, and blacks say, well, if it's fuzzy hair, it's Negroes. And it's like, well, Richard Simmons, y'all know who Richard Simmons is? Yeah, that's not a Negro. And that's hair that looks very much like this, or a little bit less than this right here. And that still falls under that Ulu version and still not Negroid. And so these people are well aware. They can tell what Negroid hair is. And so when we look at Queen Ty right here, I think it's pretty evident what she looks like. And you can see how wide her nose is, or a normal Negro nose, even with admix most of the time, versus how they're in thin lips and so on, light skin because she didn't get the process done to it. Her natural hair stayed with her. She was able to grow it out, didn't never shave it off and have it shorter and kept a wig and so on. And oh yeah, her hair is brown like chestnut with auburn and light highlights in it. Yeah, that's Queen Ty. But of course they have this wood thing, and blacks try to say, oh, it's an afro, it looks like this, it looks like this. And they've analyzed it with a CAT scan because they all knew it looked funny bulging out, and that it has this grid on it. And that grid showed up to be metal, and they're like, this is wood, what's that? So they CAT scanned it, and it's a silver veil, finely made silver veil they had draped over it. And what she's wearing on her head is a pharaoh type hat. Yeah, and got the silver veil draped over the top of it. It's quite neat when you find out that, but then that destroys the whole black and afro and everything. But let's continue. This is also this Queen Ty. So again, we can see that there's this chestnut brown with lighter highlights in it, and some of them even lighter brown and so on. And they're saying, no, she wasn't old enough to have had gray hair, and this hasn't been hennaed. Although there are some of them that have henna where they band their hair too, where down the long length of their long Caucasian hair, they'll have like henna banding onto it, some ceremonial thing they used to do and everything, and a lot of them have it. But yeah, so, and you see how her skin is dark like that. Well, we're fixing to show that mummy that I was talking about, but I think I'm going to put it in part 2 because I'm going to make you come look at how you get a dark mummy like this. Now, the secondary, after they desiccate the mummy and put them in natron and dry them all out and they make some beef jerky and turn dark, then they shellac them. And as they do, they wrap them. And again, shellac in places and put in sacred ornaments and everything. But his hair is a dark red. And they said, well, he's got henna on it. He's got henna on it. And go, yes, he's got henna on it. And they took a few of his hairs out and checked it out. And even it was even with some company, it was a L'Oreal, some company that has to do with hair and everything. But they have a lab that's of the best in the world about hair, so they had them check it there. And they said, yeah, it's red hair, and it's not that bright ginger. It's like the dark red hair. Yeah. And naturally and stuff, and you look at his face structure and you can tell it's a Caucasian and thin nose, but everybody sees black people that are nilotic in that area that are still alive and not desiccated, turned dark and shellacked, and try to say, well, that's what they were. Well, looking at their genetics too, 7 Phoenician 7 just did a series, and she said she's only getting started, but the nilotic people around there have ancient Eurasian admix in them and stuff, and it shows that they had the backflow into them and everything whenever they weren't as close to Egypt and close to North Africa way back in the day, and how it floated out. The Green Sahara Project shows a Caucasian off Cro-Mag mectoid type, kind of like Canary Islands and stuff, and people that led on to the Amazigh and people like that too, and connections into that in Iberia of ancient times too. So there was a connection across there when people are going, well, they didn't have boats, and it's like, they had boats 16,000 BC, and that's confirmed. But then again, if you say 50,000 BC, somebody got to Australia, don't tell me they floated on a rag or if they did, then somebody else could have done that to other places. But people are able to get across that. That's a few kilometers versus going all the way to Australia. They did that 50,000 years ago, you're saying? Okay, that's enough about there weren't no boats. How do people get to the Philippines and these places that no matter what glacial maximum, minimum, there was no connectives? Right. And then they want to come out with conspiracy theories. Look at those lips and how thin that is too. That sounds weird. It kind of looks like my brother. My brother has dark brown, the black hair, and would get highlights during summer and stuff, especially out skateboarding and doing things. And here's another one of the red ochre ones that I was telling you about before, where he's been soaked with red ochre. Right, and shows you a symbolic red ochre burial. When we talk about red ochre, I'll mention this going into the next one here, guys. Red ochre is a symbology that goes back with Caucasian people and Caucasian burials, and it goes back way back for Cro-Magnon types, and they've seen it in variations and coming into it, and something that was kept. By kept, I mean it goes on for some 30,000 years or more, and then it fades out at the very end of it here, but we've still easily able to see all these, and some of them are in weird places around the world. And people have tried to make connections on that too, but then due to logistics, people aren't going to allow that skeleton to get DNA tested and things, and so on. But let's just continue. Looking at this mummy, it looks a lot like Ginger, but it's not. But he has straight hair, and it looks like it's been grayed and perhaps hennaed, but it's more of a reddish hair too, but also it's just straight. And here's a drawing, an ancient drawing that they had done of one of the heads and how curly the hair is on it. And again, that's Caucasian hair. And this is a female mummy from Thebes. And Professor Sacaldi with a research team studies some of the hairs of the mummies of the scalp. Ramses II was about 87 years old when he died. I think they say 88 now. And his hair had turned white, or he could be 92, depending on if you use the Manetho thing or if you come in with the other one. Regardless, his hair had turned white. Sacaldi determined that the reddish-yellow color of the hair was due to a dye with a dilute henna solution. As we saw earlier, many Egyptians dyed their hair, and this personal habit was preserved through the embalmers. However, traces of the hair's original color remained in the roots. Microscope examination showed that the hair roots examined contained natural red pigments, which therefore during his younger days, Ramsay II had been a redhead. Further analysis concluded that these red pigments did not result from the hair somehow fading or otherwise being altered after death or natron process and things like that, they're saying. Represents Ramsay's natural hair colors. Cicalda also studied the cross-section of the hairs and determined from their oval shape that Ramses had been God, I have trouble with that word, symmetric or wavy-haired, finally, but not even fully wavy-haired. It's slightly wavy-haired. He stated that such a combination of features showed that Ramses had been a pale leucoderm, or white-skinned person, referred to the above report. And so here now we look at his hair, and you can tell what this man looks like, and he has somewhat of a hooked, nose. Wow, that's something like what? Yeah, slightly bald too. Looks a lot like Greek people and stuff back then. And there's a reason for that, because they're very closely related in some ways. So, now, please be reminded who were the real Egyptians authentically. Egyptians also tended to wear wigs or even extensions, obviously headpieces or headdresses. Many shaved their heads, others shortly cropped, while others perhaps allowing their hair to grow out at certain points in time or eventually, vastly contrasting so the two natural hair type. Only slaves were not allowed to wear wigs. Please pay no mind to the Afrocentric nonsense about Egyptians. They were not black African, and neither did they have Afro-styled hair or anything similar. Egyptians would have had straight, wavy, curly, frizzy, or coarse hair, and these are some recreations of what ancient Egyptians would have looked like from their skulls. Some of them are Old Kingdom, some are Middle Kingdom, some are New Kingdom, but I think these are old and one's a medium, Middle Kingdom. Another picture of that one lady there looking more head on. No genetic cell to tell what color her eyes were, but that doesn't matter. We can tell which race of humans she is. This a computer generated form of what somebody would have looked like, but also they have an overbite, so it's weird they gave him that kind of look, but also from the hair, it's straight on this one guy. They did this depiction here, and people told him that they had a misformed number off of using the nose if you're using the program that he was, and that it would have been that he's making the nose way too long. And he goes, well, I shortened it up already off the figure because it looks too long, and why would he have such a bird pointy nose? So look at this picture here, and they did it again without the wrong mathematical equation in for the nose, and he would have looked more like this. Yeah, and again, that's Caucasian, and that's a Caucasian. And so here's the way the wigs hair pieces look, and of course they say, well, oh, they braid their hair. Black people braid their hair. Quite often you braid your hair now because you're either left with a fro, or you braid your hair, or you put a lot of expensive products in it. Yeah, and you still grease the hair and do everything to try to make that happen, but that's not what this is. And Bo Derek, and a lot of people can braid their hair, and there's so many burials found with braided hair and French braiding and all kinds of braiding that it's not like braiding is, our curly hair all of a sudden makes somebody a Negro. And it's sad that they try to even say that. Here's the way a face would look. And this is the one that I told people that if you put a wig on him, he would be Tommy Lee of Motley Crue. Can you kind of see it, especially in the nose and the mouth and the eyes? Just really Tommy Lee. Okay, never mind. But here's another picture of an old elder lady, Caucasian. Here's a picture of a man, and he had a thin mustache, and it ran over onto his cheek rather than cutting it off short. And so they drew and all of his stubble, so it looked like he had it grown through and around. But they shaved him, and so they did the picture of him, and it looks like here. And he still had, good skin attached and stuff. And here's another depiction. And